China has reopened its embassy in Mogadishu more than 23 years after its closure. Now, Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, Chinese Deputy Foreign Minister Chang Ming, the Chinese Ambassador to Somalia Weng Hongtian, and the United Nations Envoy to Somalia Nicholas K. were among top dignitaries who attended the opening ceremony. Now, Chinese diplomats left Somalia in January of 1991 after former leader Mohammed Siad Barre was overthrown and warlords turned on each other, plunging the country into over 2 decades of chaos. But Somalia has now hit a path to recovery. The 2012 transition put in place a federal government in Mogadishu committed to inclusiveness, reconciliation and peace based on a provisional constitution. The state's collapse had undermined basic service delivery with a severe impact on human development outcomes. Out of 170 countries, Somalia is now among the 5 least developed as measured by the 2012 Human Development Index. Now, with more than 70% of the population under the age of 30, Somalia is a young country with enormous development needs. Among the more urgent are food security and a large displaced population strewn around the region and in the diaspora. Now, the 2012 Human Development Index report estimates per capita GDP at $284 against a sub-Saharan Africa average of $1,300 per capita. Livestock is the mainstay of the economy and is estimated to generate about 60% of job opportunities and 40% of GDP. The export of livestock and meat generates 80% of foreign currency. Humanitarian aid and remittances are the key sources of income, and official development assistance per capita is $75, double the average $36 per capita for fragile states. The other main source of revenue is overseas remittances, estimated at $1 billion, which makes up some 35% of GDP, the highest worldwide. Well, the reopening of the Chinese embassy in Mogadishu marked an important milestone in bilateral ties between China and Somalia and signaled growing confidence in the future of the Horn of Africa country. Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud exuded optimism in this exclusive interview with CCTV.
Mr. President, you attended personally the reopening of the China embassy in Somalia on October the 12th. What's your take on this event?
Well, this was a very, very important event, and it was a turning point for the relationship between China and Somalia. After 23 years, the Chinese embassy is reopened. So this sends a very strong and positive signal to the Somali people and also to the international community that now major countries, big countries like China is coming back to Somalia and its diplomats are operating in Somalia. This is a very good indicator for the security level and the security progress and improvement that's taking in Somalia. Besides that, it's also rejuvenating, re-energizing the relationship between Somalia and China, which has been there for a long, long time.
We know that Somalia and China enjoyed very close relations in the past, and Somalia is the first Eastern African country to establish diplomatic ties with China. What do you think can be the future relations between China and Somalia now with the reopening of China's embassy in Somalia?
Well, you see, as you rightly said, China and Somalia has that long ties relationship between the two countries. Somalia supported China when China needed the support of Somalia, particularly when China was joining the United Nations. Somalia was those few countries that strongly supported China to come into the United Nations. And reciprocally, China has assisted Somalia in many areas. And the relationship was long before China joined the United Nations in the 70s. Here in 1964, Premier Zhou Enlai visited Somalia, and there are still, I remember the songs of those early days that when we were very, very young kids in the school, and not even in the school age, but the reception of Zhou Enlai was very, very big one, and China supported Somalia in developing infrastructure in the 1970s and 1980s. A 900-kilometer highway was built by China here in Somalia that links from north to south the country. You must have seen the National Theatre, the maternal hospital, children and mothers hospital, the stadium, which can take 30,000 spectators in the national stadiums. So the China and Somalia relationship has always been there, but the civil war, the problem of Somalia, this is a time now we reestablish it, the cooperation. This is a time that Somalia needs the real support of China in terms of infrastructure, in terms of human resources development, in terms of security sector development of Somalia. These are some of the issues that we have raised with the Chinese government, and we are expecting that China will be helping Somalia in all these areas. So the relationship, the opening of the embassy is an indicator, and it's the base for furthering this relationship.
As you said, Mr. President, you welcome China's investment in Somalia. However, there are other voices saying that China is only interested in the African continent's natural resources, even call it new colonism. What's your take on that?
No. I completely disagree with that. Africa in general, particularly if I take Somalia, I just told you now that we are very rich. But the reality is we cannot benefit this richness. We need technological capability. We need financial capability, which Somalia does not have today. So what we believe is that the resources and the richness of Somalia is there. The people are poor. We cannot benefit these resources without the knowledge, without the financial investment of the foreign countries. And China, I believe, is the only country in the world that its investment, its support, has no money strings attached to it. There's no money string, particularly political strings attached to it. Africa today needs investment, needs know-how. And in many countries, they do not transfer technology easily. But what we're seeing in many parts of Africa is how the Chinese are dealing with this is absolutely very good.
Mr. President, what do you think are now the main obstacles for further development of Somalia?
We have passed through a number of security problems that we already have come up. The most difficult one is the one that has been created by the extremists and the terrorists. Al-Shabaab, who was affiliated of Al-Qaeda, who has been operating Somalia since 2006, 2007. They were controlling almost all Somalia. They make it a training ground, breeding ground for training facilities, bomb-making facilities. And they really affected the people's production and everything. Now that's ending now. This is with the help of the African Union mission forces in the ground, and with the help of establishing Somali National Army, Somali Police Force, and of course Somali Intelligence Agency, put together. It's almost now, I can say, more than 80% of the territory controlled by Al-Shabaab has been recovered. The young generation from Al-Shabaab now is defecting, and they are coming back to their families and their clans. Still they are there, but we are very, very much hopeful that we will eliminate them completely.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, and you're most welcome.
It's a great honor.
Wish you all the best. It's a great pleasure.
Now, over the last 3 years, Somalia has slowly but steadily been shedding its war-torn image of the last 2 decades. Various efforts have been put in place by the international community to help Somalia return to its once prosperous ways. 3 years on, what more still needs to be done?
The reopening of the Chinese embassy in Mogadishu is set to boost Somalia's post-conflict recovery. The return of Beijing diplomats to Somalia serves as a sign of growing confidence in the leadership and the future of the Horn of Africa country. It effectively sets the stage for renewed bilateral relations that may prove critical for Somalia as it seeks to rebuild.
Today, our embassy in Somalia is officially reopened. This once again demonstrates our further support to the peace process and the federal government in Somalia, as well as the Highness faith and growing China-Somalia relations.
Battered by years of civil war, Somalia urgently requires international help to rebuild its institutions and put its economy back on track. China is aware of this need and will seek to play its role in Somalia's reconstruction efforts. Prior to the civil war, China-Somalia ties were quite close. China sponsored a number of development projects in Somalia, including the construction of roads, hospitals and sports stadiums. The reopening of the mission in Mogadishu is set to revive this old friendship.
It's a great honor and opportunity today for Somalia and for the relationship between Somalia and China to have reopened the Chinese embassy here in Somalia after more than 2 decades that there was no Chinese embassy.
Even though we did not have an embassy in Mogadishu, China and Somalia maintained some form of economic relations. Bilateral trade also continued, although it remained at low levels. After more than 2 decades of conflict, Somalia is now at a turning point.
While peace and security remains key to Somalia's stability and recovery going forward, but how can this be ensured? China's Special Envoy for African Affairs, Ambassador Zhong Xianghua, weighs in on the prospects of lasting peace in Somalia.
Somalia is not burden, it's our friend. When we think about Somalia, we always think about first the traditional friendship. And I'm very happy after a few years of preparation and promotion and operations, we have our embassy officially opened in the last few days in Mogadishu. So it is great to see our embassy start work there and to make the Chinese presence in that country more visible and more approachable, and also give us the first-hand information on what's happening in the land and give us all the correct assessment about what we can do to help this country, to help the welfare of the people there. So that's the situation and our purpose.
While Somalia is still grappling with immense challenges over post-conflict country, the task of reconstruction is massive and the Horn of Africa country needs all the assistance it can get. The reopening of the Chinese embassy in Mogadishu is indeed a milestone and a vote of confidence in the future of Somalia. But what issues need urgent attention as the country seeks to rebuild? Well, joining me to discuss this situation from Mogadishu is Abdi Ante, the Executive Director of Heritage Institute for Policy Studies, a Somalia think tank. And in studio here with me is Ambassador Boaz Mbaya, a former career Kenyan diplomat who has also served at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Abdi, I'm going to start off with you. In Somalia, China has reopened its embassy there in Somalia after a 23-year-old absence. What is the significance of this to Somalis?
It cannot be underplayed. The significance is pretty big. It is a huge milestone for both Somalia and for China. China is a member of the Security Council. It is also a giant economic power in the world. So the semblance of China's reopening of its embassy in Mogadishu for the first time after 20 years is a pretty big deal.
Well, clearly there are challenges, though, that Somalia is still facing at this moment. What do you see as the challenges still remaining for the country, even as the country, begins attracting foreign investment, begin getting in foreign powers into the country?
Well, the challenges facing Somalia are immense and huge, ranging from security challenges to political challenges to economic challenges. I think the principal challenge right now is security as the country continues to grapple with defeating an insurgent group with Al-Shabaab. Of course, it's also, there is the challenge of creating the future of Somalia as a viable democratic state in the Horn of Africa. Right now, the country is going through a phase of federating the country and creating federal member states, and that is creating huge internal problems. So the challenges are many, but clearly there are reasons to be optimistic about the future of Somalia right now.
There are reasons to be optimistic about the future of Somalia, and I just want to go back to what President Mohammed said during his election speech there when he won. He said he asked Somalis, though, to collaborate with him to rebuild the country. Are we seeing, though, that influence of Somalis, though, in rebuilding the country? How far along is that rebuilding process?
Well, this is a failed state that had been a failed state for 23 years now, or 24 years. And so rebuilding Somalia is going to be a massive project. It is going to take decades, if not longer. But Rome has not been built in one day. We are now seeing clear signs of recovery with hundreds, if not thousands, of Somalis coming back from the diaspora, reinvesting in the country. There is reinvigoration of the economic base of the country. We're seeing signs of even foreign investment with the oil and energy sector that are also starting. So that's why there are reasons to be optimistic. Clearly, the reopening of the Chinese embassy here last week is yet another sign that even major players around the world are now looking at Somalia more seriously and considering it as a partner for investment, for trade, and for security in the Horn of Africa.
All right, Ambassador, we're looking at China's reopening of an embassy there after, a 23-year-old absence. I think the U.S. also did intimate that it was also going to reopen the embassy there. How is the region viewing all these developments, though, in Somalia?
Well, I heard the last tail end of the last speaker's contribution, but I think I agree with him that there is hope for Somalia after 23 years of chaos. The beginning point, I think, should be for Somalia itself to define what its national interest is. And when you look at national interest, there are three basic points, really. The first is security. And security is at the bottom end of everything. Without security, there cannot be development. And without security, you cannot have a government that is functional. You cannot have a situation where you can create unity in the country. And you cannot, therefore, have a situation where you can galvanize the citizens of the country to come into play in terms of nation building. So there is hope, yes, but there is a lot of work to be done in terms of what they're going to do to improve the security in the country.
That whole question of security, Abdi, is still quite a thorny issue, though, and for the fragile state that is Somalia. How is the government, though, handling this question of security?
As I said, a principal challenge is still facing the country, and the government is security. The state security institutions remain incredibly weak. They remain unable to deal with major security issues emanating from the insurgency of Al-Shabaab. But that said, there had been major progress that had been made over the past 3 years, even on security. I recall back about 4 years ago, in 2010, and Mogadishu was practically unlivable for most people. And today, we're seeing embassies and other opportunities coming back to Mogadishu. Clearly, there are signs that the country is on the right direction. Of course, the government is not consolidating as much as it should have in terms of dealing with security. And principally, that starts with creating credible and competent and inclusive state security agencies. There is a huge struggle right now in that direction.
And that is why, though, Abdi, there is a lot of international support now for Somalia in that reconstruction bid. Though, in terms of China's role in Somalia with its reconstruction, after this long, what do you see China's role as being in that reconstruction situation?
Well, I think China has a global reputation of being able to engage with developing countries directly with, massive trade and investment and infrastructural projects. And Somalia is now could be the perfect case for China in the Horn of Africa. Of course, China has other main partners, in Ethiopia and Kenya and others, but Somalia is one country where practically the basic infrastructure of the country had been destroyed in 23 years of civil war. There are massive opportunities to rebuild that, and China is uniquely positioned to take advantage of that. Of course, there are other countries that are already making some progress, Turkey being a principal one. The EU and the US are all also making some investment in Somalia, but I think China could be entirely a different ballgame.
All right. Ambassador, you're watching the developments in Somalia, though, from neighboring Kenya. What's your main concern when it comes to the country at the point?
As I said, security is a very critical issue, but beyond security, we need to have good neighborliness in the sense that Somalia's neighbors must come to his aid. Somalia's neighbors must play a role, and I think we are trying to play a role, Kenya, Uganda, and the IGAD member countries, in terms of trying to ensure that security is stabilized in Somalia so that it can allow the Somali people to engage in meaningful economic activities. Without the support of the region, even if Somalia tried on its own, it would be very difficult. We welcome the role China is playing, not just in Somalia, but in the rest of Africa, because they think they're coming in with a different view of development prospects for the African countries, which not necessarily having to be tied to a lot of things, but they are coming in to help as a friend, as a developing country themselves, which they still consider themselves to be. But I think critically, it is important that Somalia feels there are friends who will come to her aid at the time of need.
What do you see, though, as the region's input here in terms of Somalia? Because as Abdi has mentioned, we are seeing a lot of the international community coming in now to support and invest in Somalia. What do you see as the region's input here?
If the region could also begin to invest in Somalia, that will send a very strong signal to outside partners to come in a big force, because that is a vote of confidence in the developing security situation, improvement of the security situation in Somalia. But above that, the region should also be looking at how Somali can resettle its people, because there are a lot of Somalis who are living outside as refugees who ran away because of the problems. Many of them are in countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, and other neighboring countries, and as far as the United States of America. But if we begin to show confidence in Somalia, I think they'll begin to see that the situation is developing well in their own country.
All right, let's cross now over to Beijing. Professor Ho Wenping, the Director of African Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, is joining us now from Beijing. Professor Ho Wenping, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. China has just reopened its embassy in Somalia after 23 years. Can you give us an indication? What is the significance of this for China? Why has China seen at this point that it is necessary to have a presence in Somalia?
The decision has been made based on three elements. The number one is now the situation in Somalia now has been changed, and now the security situation has been improved. Dramatically ever since the federal government has been established, and also the parliament has been also in function. So that's why Chinese foreign ministers think now our safety, the diplomatic safety can be assured. So number two, I think this is the move trying to give backup to the Somali's stability, because with this reopen of our embassy, so which means we have a very strong confidence for Somali's future, the national reconstruction, and also the stability in the future. And thirdly, I think Somalia has enjoyed very important strategic position, geopolitically, and also for the in terms of the anti-piracy career. So we all know ever since 2008, China has sent warships to join the international call for fighting the piracy around the Somali offshore. So I think with the joint effort for push forward the stability on land in Somalia, then the anti-piracy career can be achieved successfully. So that's the third reason. And also, I think maybe plus together, that is the anti-terror campaign also is very important because Somalia is a very important channel. Some terrorists based in the Middle East area,
right,
they want to use this region, the Horn of Africa, and trying to expand it, their influence to the Sub-Sahara region. Plus, the Al-Shabaab influence has been there. So I think this is a number of elements has joined together, and then I think pushed China to make this decision to reopen our embassy there.
All right, Professor Hoto, what bilateral issues, though, do you see dominating the Somali-China relationship going forward?
First of all, I think with the embassy there, at least Chinese, those business person, their interests can be guaranteed. And secondly, because the post-conflict reconstruction in Somalia, they need a lot of investment. They need especially the technical transfer. So I think in terms of economic development, China can offer a lot of help. I think even before we reopened the embassy, the trade between Somalia and China has been already improved dramatically. When we check the number, the trade volume, we can see those numbers has been changed year by year, especially from the 2012 to the 2013. That trade volume has been improved even by 44%. So I think a lot of even humanitarian aid also can be delivered to Somalia.
All right. Abdi, we're going to wind up now in a moment, but in the last 2 years, though, Somalia has entered into a new chapter there. Can the world, though, still describe Somalia at this point as a failed state?
Clearly, Somalia is now at a recovery stage after a 23-year-long civil war. The government, for the first time, is non-transitional. The Security Council, as I pointed out earlier, has eased the arms embargo. The U.S. government has recognized formally the Somali government about 2 years ago for the first time. Now China is reopening its embassy. All of these combined are indication, as the professor was saying, a vote of confidence for what seems to be a clear path to recovery for Somalia. Now, one also has to caution that Somalia has a long way to go for a full recovery. The essence of government sometimes continues to be contested within Somalia. The question of federalism and how to share natural resources and revenue and so on is deeply contested across the country. There are various structural as well as policy issues, problems that are surrounding this government. But what's important is right now what needs to be done is to consolidate the gains that had been made in the last 2 years, especially the security gains against Al-Shabaab, the rebuilding of state institutions and so on. All of these things need to be consolidated and taken advantage of. I think that's where the government needs to put much of its effort right now.
All right, Professor Ho Wenping, the Director of African Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, joining us from Beijing. Abdi Ainte, the Executive Director of Heritage Institute for Policy Studies, joining us from Mogadishu, and in studio with me, Ambassador Boaz Mbaya, a former career diplomat, joining me here in Nairobi. To you all, I thank you. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Goodbye.